I'll do the music since this is like a live, thing. I'll just do it. Well, dun 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 dun. There you go.
Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey Podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined as always by the ever wonderful Jason Johnston Yellen. But this time around, we are joined by everybody's favorite 30-year-old.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Elijah, I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
First off, happy birthday.
Thank you.
What does it feel like to know in 10 years you'll be 40? Off to you.
Just another step closer to death, and there's something comforting about that.
Yeah. Well, maybe not for you. Anyway, so I'm joined here, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, Jason Johnston Yellen, and we have in the car birthday boy Elijah Ammon, the one and only, our dear Jess Lomas. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Jess.
And then to my left, which we may or may not hear from too much, but we'll see. We have the one and only Sweet Scott. Hey, Sweet Scott. Hello. So this is Jason.
Yes, Joshua.
Stop looking at your phone.
I'm looking at the questions.
All right.
Unplug and be present.
This
He's always on his phone.
You know me, you
Social
know
media.
me, you know
This
me.
is the final episode of season 6.
This is amazing. What an achievement. I'm so proud of us.
Does it feel like it's been 6 full months?
6 full months?
The years? 6 full.
This
Man.
question feels like it's 6 full years.
Like, seriously, does it feel like it's been 6 full years of podcasting?
What is time, right? It could be 60 years, it could be 6 years, it could be 6 months, as you rightly said a moment ago.
Yeah.
It's just been wonderful. Absolutely fantastic. I'm so impressed with the number of questions we've got for today.
Uh-huh.
I'm
As am
so
I.
excited that we're driving in the car with the birthday boy. If we live to tell this tale, it will be a great tale
To tell?
to tell.
So, are we gonna just hop right into
Let's do it. First
Really?
question.
Jess, you're cool with that? Just
Do
hopping
it.
right in?
Do it.
Do you need some transition music? I could.
Yeah, do you have some transition? Give me some transition
Just
music.
don't transition us into Canada.
Actually, don't. I've changed my mind. I don't want to hear any of that. Okay. We're going to start off with James Foster. He's like the OG.
We just saw him this
Yeah, we
weekend.
saw him this weekend. He's like the OG One Nation Under Whiskey fan. And his email, subject says, mailbag, Talisker fades, what the fuck? Actually, WTF. So he says, so, we had a Talisker tasting in our little tasting society, parenthetical comment, not a drinking club.
Correct.
They were okay, but none had that pepper bite I loved in Talisker last millennia. So I opened some old unopened bottles I had lying around and foie. Yup, no comparison. Lovely pepper. What did they change? Why have other distilleries done the same?
It's a serious question.
That is a serious question. I mean, do either of you or any of you, I mean, know of any changes to Talisker?
Not off the top of my head, but are we being held to the post here on behalf of Diageo?
I think Talisker is a great product.
Elijah's clearly still on brand
Are you signing a waiver while you're driving?
Yes.
with his other hand.
Now he's doing it a third time. It's in triplicate.
But I don't. This isn't just a Diageo thing.
No.
Right? We've had this conversation for years about Lafroig. Lafroig
Yeah.
has gone from the love it
Yeah.
or hate it dram in the 90s to something much more minerally, something much softer, something, a little more delicate, maybe not hugely delicate.
Yeah.
You know, I think we just have to be careful of falling into the trap of whiskey was better in the days when I was getting into whiskey, right? And so I think Foster putting contemporary bottles against unopened older bottles is a fair side-by-side comparison.
But
You know, final thing,
Go
and then
ahead.
I'll let you chime in, Joshua. But we know distilleries are running the stills harder and faster than they ever have before. And some of the more careful distilling practices have kind of gone the way of the dodo, right? It's run spirit through stills and get it in bottle and sell it globally.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. With demand comes the need to increase production, and sometimes that means speed things up. But do you feel that it's all back to production and not necessarily to blending or purposeful evolution of a flavor profile?
That's a good point. I was going to say that I wondered if it was more to do with when the product hits the blending labs, when they're putting together the expressions, whether or not it's actually that point rather than production. I would have thought maybe the production side, when you're saying they run the stills, harder and more, maybe it's actually that they've got a more efficient distilling. But I'm sure the change in the flavors, I think that's more going to come from a blending lab.
So do you think in that case that Talisker, as one example, has blended the pepper out of their offerings?
Possibly. I've thought for a long time the reason Lafroig, or one of the reasons Lafroig has changed so dramatically, is because there's still a flexibility at the very end before it hits being put in glass bottles. There's still a bit where you can tinker a little bit with, shapes of what a whiskey looks like. And maybe they're, choosing to pick casks that have a less peppery flavor. Or it could also be the casks themselves, I guess, rather than the stills. Maybe it's the wood that's available for distilleries these days is changing.
See, I always thought the pepper, at least the Talisker example specifically, I always thought that was something to do with their peat, but I don't know enough about their production to say, are they using a type of peat that no one else is using, and hence that's how Talisker gets that pepper. Like I don't know where that would come from to even yeah.
Can you think of other examples, other distilleries?
Yes.
We've said Talisker, we've said
But more.
Lafroig.
But more. I mean, think about conversations with Ollie, and he talks about the differences between 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. They all have their own sort of personality to them. He loves early 2000s, but more for very specific reasons.
Jess Lomas, also our in-house Bowmore expert.
I'm happy to take that title. Well, the Bowmore, I know for a fact, having spoken to various people at the distillery and David Turner, that's a very specific choice. It's a positive action which has been taken from the very beginning to shape how the spirit is being run through the stills, how they're casking it. That's, to me, that's not industry secret. They're very upfront about the shape and the direction of what they're wanting to produce and how they want Bowmore to look. So I think maybe it's a combination of all the variables rather than it being like one single easy button and suddenly you've eradicated a style.
Yeah.
Anyone else come to mind?
I've got two off the top of my head.
Oof.
But I think James asked this question. Obviously, it's a negative experience he had. But what Jess was touching on, what I really liked, producers today are giving the current market, the entry-level consumer a different product than you had years ago. So I remember when I was first getting into whiskey, and this was 2014, and someone told me, Lagavulin 16. I told everyone that's my favorite whiskey. That's not what it used to taste like.
Yeah.
And I've heard that the past 9 years. People saying that, that it's not as good as it used to be. There's some brand new users that pick up a bottle, because they got a lot of branding and a lot of shelf placement, and they think it's great. Another one, Glenallachie. I mean, sorry, not Glenallachie, Glendronach. I was thinking Billy Walker.
All right.
Yeah.
But I remember that the 15 and 18 year were great, 10 years ago.
Well, that one gets complicated, right?
Yeah,
because
but I understand there's a whole story with that and what that stock actually was that was being
the
bottled.
actual age of that stock.
Exactly, but you have a different generation, a different blender, someone like, through the whole Glendronach line is presenting something different, and they're not trying to reach James Foster anymore. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, they're reaching like the person who's like, oh, Glendronach 12, I can pull this off the shelf. I have no idea what natural color is or chill filtration or I don't know what that is. It's a nice red packaged scotch.
It's kind of back to the Kevin Dunlop question or example from a few months back. The listener talked about getting a bottle of Laphroaig Select for his sister or his sister's fiance, and he thought it would be great because it's a Laphroaig and so on and so forth. And Laphroaig Select, I think it's a perfectly fine whiskey, but it's a soft little puppy compared to what Laphroaig entry level used to be like. So I really like your point. It's almost as if they're trying to bring in a different segment of the consumer through a different presentation of what that brand is, what that distillery should taste like.
Which I think is why Talisker's a good example from Foster here.
There you go. I think we just solved it, guys.
Awesome. World peace.
Woof.
Look at us. Question 1 sorted. Woof.
Done. All right. Okay. Foof. All right, here. Next. Actually, speaking of Oliver Chilton, he had sent in a question as well.
Is it a timing-related
leaflet.
question?
A pamphlet, if you will.
So this is from our very good friend Ollie Chilton, and says, "Hello all. The other day I was hosting a tasting for a company retailer I worked for almost 20 years ago. The gentleman who had organized this had found that I was a previous employee of the company that he now found himself part of, and a conversation developed. I was struck by how different our journeys in whiskey had been, not just because of geography, but also because of time. We obviously had one thing in common, but very different perspectives on the thing. As I checked into my bi-weekly doses of J&J, I got to think about your business and how you have 4 different perspectives in regards to time and on whiskey. Jason being the, though forever youthful, weathered whiskey enthusiast.
Ouch.
Weathered is about the best descriptor in that sentence.
Joshua's the man clinging on to his youthful exuberance by his fingernails for the next 11 months. This son of a bitch. He's
not wrong.
He's not wrong. Jess, due in no small part to her nationality of being from God's own country, Yorkshire.
Thanks, Ollie.
Wise well beyond her tender years. And of course, Elijah, with so much time left to become as bitter as the rest of us.
That's my number one fear in this industry, is I become a bitter old whiskey consumer or some...
Come join us.
It.
It's
Just
great.
embrace it.
Rule number 5.
Is this entire letter an excuse for a character assassination? Except for
totally
my part, which
I
thanks,
think you
Ollie.
came out
That
of
was
this
very
quite
kind.
nice, Jess.
I'm scanning the email. I don't see him shitting on Swede Scott yet, but...
Is there actually a question at the end of this?
All right, so he goes, so to the questions.
Plural.
Oh.
What, for each of you, was the thing that dragged you down the rabbit hole? And is this the same/similar for each of you? How is the industry different today to when you first found it?
Oh, man.
These are deep questions.
Must not get better. Must not get better.
Good job this podcast is 8 hours long.
And do you feel the different perspectives each of you bring has an effect to what you put into bottle now and will in the future? And it says, feel free to indulge my questions offline over a dram if your mailbag episode is too full. Well, the good news is we're just filling the bag right now. with his. This will be the final question, but yeah.
And when we end this episode in 2 hours, we will have
So-
answered all 3 questions.
So I feel as if Jason and I may have shared our rabbit hole stories, which we'll reiterate. I think at least a Reader's Digest version. But why don't we start with the youngest person?
The
in
birthday
group?
boy.
The birthday boy. Do you need the questions again?
No, I don't need the question. I just don't want to sound like a bitter old man here.
You're
So,
too young. You're too young to be a bitter old man.
late, Elijah.
Okay, keep it light. Keep it light.
Yeah, I feel like I've communicated this story a couple times, but I got into this like each one of us out of a passion for whiskey, a passion for connecting to people, and I felt like I graduated from one whiskey to the next. And when I got into the industry, I was definitely bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and ready to, share whiskey with everyone. And I feel like within maybe 3 months of being in the industry, I realized it was a lot of like emails, a lot of like begging, please buy this product. And speaking from the sales side, and a lot of like rejection. And eventually I feel like that beats you up, and then you become very critical of the industry or whiskey. But I had this change, now that I've become wise. Towards the end of my 29th year, I've decided I'm going to approach whiskey without my whiskey hat, thinker's hat all the time, and try to connect back to what made it exciting. And there's moments I've had. I'm not saying it's all been like dreary the last few years that I've been doing this, but yeah, I that's my approach now. How it's changed, there's you guys can touch on that better than I can, because I've been in this much
Surely
shorter time.
you will have seen change from, how long have you been in the industry now? Is it 8 years? 7 years?
2017. is when I
Okay,
got
so
into it.
6 years then.
Yeah.
So, were there any changes that COVID presented, or changes in people's buying habits? Do you find people? I don't want to lead the witness, but I'm curious, just to hear it from your mouth, what changes you may have seen in those 6 years.
Yeah, I think when I was first in it, everyone was hesitant to spend money on a $75 Scotch whiskey. At least in my circle, in my market that I was in. And then with COVID, I saw it completely change. But it was great for me. My most successful years and most growth I had within the industry, and just life lessons that I've learned were during those COVID years. And I saw people, their credit card was just sitting right on their desk next to their
So
laptop,
crazy.
and just easy to just click and pay. And I had great events. Actually, the very first event I did, COVID related, virtual tasting wise, was with Ollie. And it was a Black Tot SMOS combo tasting. And there might have been a Portiskeggin there too. So,
Okay.
yeah, that.
There you go.
But that was at that time of in-person event, virtual event, was the most bottles that were ever purchased by like
amazing.
a group for a tasting.
People
So that,
just depression
yeah.
buying.
And then
Yeah.
now this, I would say the last 6 months of 2022, 2023, I see people like, I think there's a reason why, you guys had this on Extra a few months back. The Whiskey Advocate Top 20, right?
Yeah.
They factor in that price point
Sure.
and the fact that Jack Daniel's Bonded won, and it's controversial, but we've talked about this weekend. There's a reason why, and I think like that price point
Yeah.
that easy drinking product is connecting with consumers.
Yep. Comfort drinking.
Comfort drinking. That's why I'm doing 2023 comfort drinking year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not right now, obviously. And also, hashtag drink responsibly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jess?
So I was just thinking about this. So you said 2017 when you started
Correct.
whiskeying? So this year is my 15th year of whiskeying, which is
Mazel.
my maths means I started when I was 3. And I was thinking about how things have changed. It's quite interesting. So I started, like Ollie, I worked in retail. The difference now between the conversations I have with people about whiskey, I definitely think the consumer is much more informed. You know, we didn't have people coming into the shop asking, what's the latest single cask from such and such a distillery? We had an entire racking shelf space dedicated to Springbank, which now would be empty.
Oh, decimated. Yeah.
We had all of the Highland Park, you know, the Earl Magnus, St. Magnus, Earl Huckon. We had to reduce them. People weren't buying these things because I guess it was just a different time, which now when I think about the things that were on the shelf, I'm like, I should have bought everything. Shoved it in an auction. I think that's really interesting. Definitely people are more interested, and lockdown for us, and I'm sure Sweet Scott would agree, really accelerated people's interest. If you already had a passing interest in whiskey, in lockdown everybody was stuck in the house, so they're like, well, yeah, sure, we'll do a tasting, you know. And tastings that I think traditionally maybe would have been a slightly harder sell because nobody had anywhere to go. They were like, well, you know, no loss. Let's, you know, I didn't have to leave the house. Let's try some whiskey that I wouldn't necessarily walk into a bar and order.
Yeah.
Because we're not going anywhere tonight anyway. So, you know, and it means I don't have to talk to the children for a bit or my flatmates or, you know, whatever you know. I think during lockdown, actually, not that it's just because of who's posed this question, but I think the most successful tasting we did during lockdown with our whiskey club that we have run for 8-9 years was the Black Top tasting. And honestly, from a hardcore group of whiskey drinkers who I think if we'd said, we're going to do a rum tasting, and they'd be like, you know, I think we would have had an okay attendance turn up. We had a great attendance come online, and it went on all night. Literally, I had to put Mitch to bed at 5 a.m. I was like, I'm ending this Zoom. Goodbye. And our group are still talking about it. And I would never have pinned that. So I think it's being, you know, COVID's done a lot of strange things, but it's afforded people opportunities that I think maybe they wouldn't have been brave enough to take themselves. And I think that's a bigger sign of the way the industry is going. You know, like when we're talking about like Foster's question, you know, whiskey is changing flavor. Is it because maybe the whiskey companies are trying to cater towards people who, you know, you're just hoping like 1 or 2 whiskeys will get you hooked? Everybody I know who drinks whiskey, it's they can name the 1 whiskey or 2 whiskeys that really changed the way they were looking. It doesn't have to be the first whiskey you had. It's the first one that made your brain go, oh, I really like this. So for me, I've talked about this before too. When I was a student in good old Aberdeen, repping Team Aberdeen, there was a pub that we just started at one end of the bar and worked our way through because it was cheap. There were no risks in taking a £1.80, £2 dram, and if you didn't like it, well, we'll just get another one. Because we were very bougie students, obviously, and so that was our playground for learning about whiskey, and I think that doesn't exist now. And I feel a bit sad that if in 2023 I was starting, okay, so 2023 is the year I'm going to learn to drink whiskey, I think you'd have to work a lot harder to drink whiskey the way I did. But part of that is you can go to more tastings. There are far more tastings than when I was starting out. There are people who act much more actively, are open and say, hey, oh, you think you want to try whiskey? Cool, we've got like 8, come try these. And that wasn't afforded to me when I decided with my 2 best friends at uni that we were going to get into whiskey. We were going to be the whiskey guys because it was really cool. Nah, we never thought it was cool, but we really liked the taste. I've always loved the history. I'm fascinated by the industry. It's full of great people and lots of stories, some of which we can't put on podcasts. To me, it's like a whole encompassing package. And sometimes I kind of forget the point of whiskey is the drinking, because I get so caught up with the like, who can we talk to? Where can we go visit things? What does this look like? Yesterday, I got caught looking at the shipping boxes in a distillery, that kind of thing.
You got really jazzed up by those boxes, Jess.
I just love a good box. So it's so much more for me. And my turning point when I realized that I wasn't going to be a super successful hotshot lawyer, and that actually whiskey was much more interesting and fulfilling to my mind as a lifestyle choice. Do we call it a lifestyle choice? That's really why. This is not what I was supposed to be doing, but I'm not sad about it. I love this far more than I think what I actually was meant to do. So, yeah, I think in terms of like recruiting people into the cult of whiskey, I think we're much more open. You can be very lucky and meet incredibly generous people who have phenomenal collections, who are very happy to pour whatever. They'll open bottles, but now you don't necessarily need to know that guy or woman who has an amazing collection. There's loads of it's really easy to join an online tasting. It's really easy to seek out something on Facebook, and see what people are talking about. I love that because I've thought for a long time the drinks industry, not just whiskey, but can be a bit kind of, you have to know, if you know, you know.
Yeah,
and there's definitely still a lot of that, and I'm definitely guilty of playing the if you know, you know. So if I was starting out again now, there's I would say multiple ways for you to get into whiskey that wasn't available to me 15 years ago. And so I'm excited to see what it looks like in another 15 years. Another 15 years, how old will we all be?
So with that in mind, Jess,
45.
given what Ollie's asking at the end of that question, how does everything you've just said affect what you're looking at putting into bottle and selling into global markets?
I mean, obviously, I'm constantly having to reject a plethora of 1960s Bowmores and 50s Mortlocks. I just cannot move for them. If anybody wants them, come take them off my desk. Brora, I pour it down the sink. Yeah, I guess maybe as a kind of peek behind the curtains, those two things are not necessarily connected in the way they should be. Mm-hmm. We are tied to what casks are available to companies like ours, but what we can do is then, with the resources that we get with the casks that are available on the lists and that we purchase, it's then how we present them. So Single Cask Nation choose to try and present whiskies in what I would think as kind of like the I'm gonna say purist, I don't like that, but we're going for single cask, so we're working within the parameters of knowing that we're not creating a consistent Talisker that's going to be the same today in 15 years, in 20 years.
Yeah.
It's a moment in time. We've picked a cask, which once it's done, it's done. And sometimes that's really sad, and I wish I'd bought all of the bottles. And sometimes you're like, okay, well, that was cool. Chalk it off, your list and move on. What's the next cask? To me, as a whiskey drinker, I'm much more of that mindset of like, I've had some really cool stuff, but I'm always looking to see what's coming rather than like having a consistent thing in my shelf. But I am very aware that I'm operating in a niche of a niche. Like, it's also kind of cool sometimes to walk in a store far, far away from your homeland and see a very consistent product on the shelf, insert brand here. Like that's not me though. I'm not necessarily the consumer that these big companies are looking for. I'm probably not going to be in the supermarket seeing, oh, that's got £15 off this week, or I'm more likely to be in a specialist retailer being like, what's the latest release from somebody? Because I think whiskey is all encompassing. You can be both of those people and none. You can be totally different. Again, you don't have to be a single cask chaser. Can I trademark that? Single cask chaser? But you can totally appreciate, like Jason's always, flying the flag for Compass Box Glasgow. That kind of, at the end of the day, when, like Elijah's saying, if you just want to be a nice drink,
exactly,
at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to have a whiskey that's going to make you work really hard. You just want something in a glass and you're just going to enjoy it. And yeah, that's why my house is full of whiskey, because I have, when you're like, pick a mood. I'm like a little Rolodex of bottles. That's obviously so that I know the perfect whiskey experience. I have to have a lot of whiskey in the house, right? Yeah. Is that enough of a rambly answer,
Yeah,
Ollie?
yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. I just like the idea of you having a Rolodex that it's 14 centigrade and rainy with some cloud cover. That means I drink insert whiskey here. I nearly said Ardbeg Wee Beastie, and I knew that wasn't correct for you. So.
Could be for that set of parameters. Maybe what I need is somebody to develop me an app where you answer a series of questions.
Oh, paging Richard.
Yeah, hey Richard, who doesn't listen to this podcast, I'm sure. And at the end it says, you should be drinking blah
Right.
blah.
I remember that did exist 10 years ago.
Did
that
it?
was a thing.
Was it?
Yeah, I remember that.
I also use the reference Rolodex, which I feel like that's a dated reference.
Isn't that a type of watch?
Yeah, I faxed myself that reference.
Excellent.
To answer this real quickly from my end of things, it was, again, shout out to Aberdeen. It was being at the University of Aberdeen, exploring Lefroy 10-year-old, finding out, discovering that you could have the flavours of a Finnish sauna in your glass without ever being in Finland, without
Delicious.
leaving Aberdeen, without leaving Elphinstone Hall. Like that really rocked my world. And to explore those lines of flavors across multiple offerings from multiple distilleries was really remarkable, right? Growing up in a family where it was bottom shelf, cheapest chips blends, and it was really just you drank to get tipsy with family, to now saying, okay, this is flavors and flavor driven. And to Ollie's question, and without wanting to get maudlin, which is always a fear of mine, is I don't think with current offerings we're as able to go down flavor journeys as we are, okay, what's available, what's the price, what story is that telling?
But I feel as if some of those changes turning by the cask. No, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that fucking Mortlach. So, yes. And this is what I was going to say before, is I didn't really want to touch on my rabbit hole moment, because I feel as if it's a story that...
If you don't stop touching your rabbit hole in this car, we are going to have a falling out.
Hold on, the rabbit's almost there. But there have been significant changes, and I think the past probably 4 to 5 years with this, these cask investment schemes have forced us to make changes to how not just we purchase and bottle whiskey, but how bottlers in general, because the access to the types of casks that we would have been able to bottle 5+ years ago, it's just that stuff doesn't really exist.
Yep.
From a good pricing standpoint. So it's forced us in a way to lean a bit heavier on something that we had been doing all along, but maybe not leaned on so heavily, and that's your world whiskeys and
diversifying.
Right, just diversifying and American
Which is a good
single
investment
malt.
strategy.
Much better than cask investment, Jason. Fuck me. Right, so to your point where you talked about not being able to really drive by flavor, I disagree with you. I think we're switching the flavor paths that we're able to present to people.
Well, and I think that's reflected in our championing of American single malt, right? We are back with distilleries. We are back on the ground floor. We are back saying, gosh, we're in a car right now heading to Skagit Valley Maltings to hang out with Matt Hoffman from Westland, right?
And Anaheim's.
Right, and Anaheim's. And we're on the ground floor here, right? This is exciting. And, I don't want us to be the people who say Scotch used to be like this in the 80s, and then it was like this in the 90s, and now it's not where it was. Scotch is still phenomenal, right? There's still wonderful things we can do with Scotch, and we will do with Scotch.
Yep.
But it's not to the detriment of these other markets, these other locales that we're exploring. I feel like the four of us are saying something similar, which is, how do we remain excited in changing times? And how do we keep consumers excited in changing times? And it just doesn't look like it did for me in 1996.
But it's But I feel as if us keeping consumers engaged and excited about the new flavors being presented is back to the drawing board where, 12 years ago, you and I felt as if we were educating and expanding the market we were trying to sell into.
Exactly.
And then people got independent bottlers. I mean, it had been around in the U.S. for quite a long time, but the pool of people who got it was quite smaller when we first started.
It's that niche of a niche
right?
of a niche that Jess is talking about.
That's definitely changed, because when I was working in retail, I wrote like a staff manual training on whiskey for the staff who I worked with, none of whom were educated on whiskey, had any interest in whiskey, but we had a lot of it and we needed to sell it. And independent bottlers was a one-page thing that I wrote explaining independent bottlers are companies who don't own distilleries but source casks and bottle them themselves. And then I had a handful of examples, and that was it. Turn the page and move on. Like, that wasn't a discussion, because our shelves were loaded with now. When I think about it, I weep a bit, but was loaded with distillery bottlings. Indie bottlers wasn't really a consideration we were making in those years. And that I was in a specialist shop. I wasn't in like a general drink store. I was in like a high-end shop, and we were selling single cask bottling. So we were selling stuff that wasn't necessarily the run-of-the-mill whiskey. It's the step up from the entry level of most distillery offerings, but it just wasn't a thing. And I think that's kind of interesting now, that if you go to a similar setup, a specialist drink shop, they've got hundreds of independent bottlers, because the demand for it is there. So people are like, oh, hey, we should, we're two famous internet bloggers, we should start an independent bottler. Whoa.
Yeah, it sounds like we're ready for the next question, Jess.
I saw on your phone there we've got Seabass, and I know that he asked an interesting question that we can put to Jess and Elijah.
Okay, so here we go. So this is Cues for the Mailbag by Christopher Sebastian, or Christopher Sebastian.
Or Seabass.
Hi, all. So I have a couple different ways to ask this question. I'll let you decide which is the best and which would serve the listening public.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to start off with question number 2, and then I'm going to do question number 1. Question number 2, and this is for Jess and Elijah. You're the CEO of Single Cask Nation for one day.
That's why I love this question.
Wait, what? One day?
For one day.
You think I'm giving it back?
Yeah. First rule, infinite CEO days.
What is your pie-in-the-sky cask that you would ask to bottle from a distillery that you personally love, but your requests fall on deaf ears to the powers that be?
Elijah's champing at the bit here to get in.
He's got a list. Okay, you can go first.
Hold on, there's a parenthetical.
Yeah, there's a parenthetical.
Oh,
The parenthetical says, this shouldn't be like a 49-year-old Imperial, cough, cough, for 11 more months, Joshua.
He's an old man. He's an old man.
But from a niche distillery that isn't guaranteed to sell well and would be a complete abuse of company resources.
Such a good question.
Eliyahu?
I can say whatever distillery I want.
Absolutely.
This is, you're the CEO,
You're CEO
of
for a
Single
day.
Cask Nation, Jason, Elijah.
It would be an American single malt, and it'd be Delbach.
Wow.
Hamilton Distillers.
Do we have a why?
Because I love Delbach. I love that company.
Okay.
And
I
why?
love
Why?
Yeah, what about Delbach? How's he going?
What do you love about it?
many things. One, I feel like they have, for a very small producer compared to some of the American single malt distilleries we got to visit this weekend, they have something providential in the sense of where the whiskey is produced that separates them from a lot of the other American single malt distilleries. They oversee an aspect of the process that a lot of distillers don't get to as far as malting, doing their own malting on site. And we're talking about comfort whiskeys. Delbach's a comfort whiskey for me.
Okay.
It's something that I can sit with some of their releases, but then there's times I don't even have to think about it. I could just enjoy it, and
Oh, I like that.
Do they have is it a floor malting? Is it more of a Saladin box type thing? Is it a tumble dryer like your man down in Tasmania?
It's kind of like a tumble dryer kind of thing. It's basically what it is. It's just a giant dryer.
Yeah.
Kind of. But yeah, it's an incredible process. I don't know. It's again, it goes back to that comfort thing. It's a relational thing. You guys can all attest to this. No one will understand until they go to Macmira what Jess and Sweet Scott feel about Macmira, right? We can listen to the podcast, we can listen to the interviews, but there's this great big spot in Jess's heart for Macmira, right? There's distilleries that Joshua and Jason are fond of, and would have never think to bottled or would have never thought to was even an option, but and that's I guess that's how I feel about it.
Nice.
Okay.
That's well said.
So that hits all Sebastian's Seabass's
It does.
criteria. It's niche, and it's not 49 years old and 1 month old whiskey.
All right, Jess.
Obviously, I would not be handing the CEO title back. I would be reinstating lots of things. I would be going to...
Got controversial real fast.
Controversial real fast. I would be, obviously, as a CEO of a very successful international independent bottling company, I'd be going to distilleries being like, what are you going to tout me with? Tell me what I should be bottling. I don't know, because my instant reaction is to be like, obviously, I would love to bottle something stupid like a Brewer or something that, is really difficult and hard, an unobtainium bottling, that kind of, or a distillery that doesn't exist anymore. I like the idea of working with, although this is maybe not, this is going to get discounted as an answer. The idea of working with like some of the smaller, newer distilleries that people haven't got to yet, that, it would be an opportunity for us to be like, hey, have you heard of these guys? This is why you should have heard of these guys.
I like that.
But I think for now, my answer is obviously going to be, and I keep telling people, the reason I started working for Single Cask Nation was to get access to Westland.
Hey, there we
So
go.
I guess... No, I don't want that to come under the category of it's not going to sell very well, because it's going to sell great, mainly to Sweet Scott, because he's going to buy all of it before it ever hits the shelf. He has threatened to do that.
Yeah.
Today's number one question is, what do you have that's like the Black Raven release in your rig
Every
house?
day.
That's today's number one question on our visit.
Obviously, you would create and have Black Raven as a standard core product.
Core.
And we'll call it Jess's Whiskey. That's what we'll write on the label. And then in small writing, inspired by Black Raven's Westland.
I think that sounds great. I'm
Instead
all up
of a
for it.
raven, you have Sven on the label.
Yeah, we'll put my own branding on it, and then like a little cask in the bottom. We'll have to call it like, I don't know, we'll think of a different bird. I'm not fast enough with a different birdie bird to put on the label. It's not a Black Raven, so they don't know I've copied them.
I think what's really interesting, though, is I think both of you have spoken to what I just put in response to Ollie there, which is Seabass says, look, take off all the parameters, take out all the security, where do your dreams lie? And you've both said something American single malt, something that we are living in right now, right? And and I feel like we've given up the crazy dreams about Scotch, and you're mentioning Brora there and Mortlach there, right? I think our dreams are really on pragmatic ground, which is what's exciting right now. And it's American single malt, Delback and Westland for you too.
You've sort of described the transition from childhood to adulthood. We no longer have pie in the sky dreams that kids were like, no, that's not realistic. Let's be adults about this. So what about you, Jason? What's your pie in the sky cask? What would you sink the company for? Its bottle.
Gosh, mine's not really fiscally related, but it would be going to Anthony Wills on bended knee and begging and begging and begging and begging.
And begging?
And I'm begging more for a Kilchoman. I would really give my eye teeth for another Kilchoman.
Wow.
It would just mean the absolute world to get to do that again.
Yeah.
And we've said that to him. We've explained that to him. and he turns his back on us.
Have we thought about taking more direct, action? Instead of asking nicely and you can do the begging, like some sort of lock-in, like I'll chain myself to a warehouse.
Oh, I like that. Yeah,
I'm not
lock-in.
leaving.
I'm very confrontational. If you guys ever-
You can do the shouting up front, and I'll be more like at the back, being like stubbornly, I'm not leaving.
Could you
You
imagine?
can do the loud bit. I'll just be like, wait, when you finished with the shouty man, I'm still here.
Could you
I
imagine?
could,
if
I
Anthony
could
Wills
be
said
like,
yes?
oh, I tied
my
Jess
gosh.
to a cask. You have no choice but to release this
A
cask.
railroad tracks.
See, this is the problem
Let's
with
tie
your
Jess
plan,
to
Elijah.
railroad
is
tracks.
You have to spend a few months growing a handlebar mustache,
Yep.
and then tie
Something
Jess to
twirlable.
the cast. Yeah, it's
He's willing to commit. He's that kind of guy.
So there you go. So there's my pie in the sky. There's my, jejune childhood
Yeah.
dreams. Joshua?
yeah. My pie in the sky dream was to bottle Imperial, and we've done that. Like that really was an absolute sense of accomplishment.
And now you can die in your advanced years.
Whoa.
Glad we got that one under the wire before you died on us, Joshua. That's good.
Yeah, I don't know if I honestly don't know if you know what I would like to do. I wouldn't want to replicate it, but I would really like, back to your example of Kilhoman and seeing, would Anthony Wills ever relent and say yes to another cask? That's your favorite Isla distillery, and I get that, and we're so proud to have had that first cask. Back to Ollie's thing about rabbit holes, Lagavulin was my rabbit hole whiskey.
I knew you were going to go back down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I told you I can't stop touching it.
Yeah.
And so I think I'd love to be able to do a Lagavulin with the Lagavulin name on it, right? To have that.
Yeah, that's good pie in the sky.
Same connection that we had where we could say, we bottled a Kilhoman, and they said, and it was a partnership, it was a collaboration.
Yeah.
I'd love to collaborate with Lagavulin.
Lovely.
Yep.
And hey, no argument for me there. Are we okay with that, Jess?
Yeah, 100%. I could live
Elijah,
with that.
you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so there was one other question from Seabass. So we did question number 2. Question number 1. And I'm going to throw this to you, Elijah, first. We'll go round robin as we did before. What whiskey do you pour when you're drinking with someone that you really trust? AKA, what wacky whiskey do you love individually that represents your palate but isn't prone to general enjoyment and should be consumed in a safe space?
We all know the answer.
Most recently?
No, just in what is that weird whiskey that you pour for your own comfort that you don't necessarily pour for other people except people who may get it, or you trust that they won't think you're a weirdo?
Makes me think of a group pour from Saturday night.
Ooh.
Hakata?
Nope.
Oh, I don't. I feel the pressure, to be honest. I don't know.
Who would you trust to let them know how much of a pervert you are?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
yes. Any Rusk.
There you go.
Any Rusk.
Do you have a go-to if you're trying to bring somebody into the Athrust cult? Is there one you've got on a shelf that you pour, or is it really just whatever IB?
Whatever.
Athrust you've got?
Usually it's whatever IB that
Okay.
I have available. But I guess I like all the Diageo special releases.
Okay.
There's like a 20, 25, maybe there's a 30 year.
You mentioned a manager's dram, a Thrusk.
Ooh, yes. Yes. That is the best Rusk I've ever had.
Yeah, there
ever.
you go. 9 years old or something?
Yeah, it was a young Rusk, fully matured in a sherry cask.
Oh, okay.
And it was great. It was great. Manager's choice.
Not farty, not sulfury.
Diageo, release more manager choice Rusk.
All right, Jess.
I'm worried that you're expecting me to use this as an opportunity to confess to drinking Jura or something.
Oh, I thought you were just going to come out with 1958 Mortlach.
That's not a safe space whiskey. That's an everyday drinking dram, Joshua. That's a really good question. I don't think I have any whiskey that I drink that I need to be hiding away drinking. Usually if I'm hiding away drinking it, it's because I don't want to share it. So maybe it is the malt liquor. I quite like... there's a Finnish rye that we've talked about this weekend by a distillery called Kira. I really like them. I know that's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, especially I think Americans who are used to a specific rye tasting in their head, like in a certain way. This is definitely not like that. It's 100% malted rye. And it, to me, doesn't have the same burn that I get if I'm drinking an American rye. But I honestly can't think of anything that I think I need to be within friends. I think the practice of swapping samples with people is a safe space thing.
Well,
There's not many places in the world. In fact, I had to tell someone that it doesn't happen all over Scotland that people walk around with these unmarked clear little bottles and they greet each other in the street and swap them. Somebody asked me if we drink whiskey everywhere in the streets, and I had to explain that is more or less just Isla. That's no normal thing. Especially if you go join the festival, you'll meet someone who you've never met in your life and be like, do you want to try this? That's a safe space thing, right? Because there are definitely, I don't think I'd be walking around Glasgow walking up to people in the street and like, hey, what have you got? Do you want some of mine? Get you in a lot of trouble really quickly.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Come up this whiskey alley.
Yeah, it's totally safe. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah, so maybe the sample swapping with people that you don't necessarily know. And sometimes that works out really well. You get some really cool stuff. And other times you don't remember waking up. No, that's...
All right, Mr. Johnston Yellen.
Well, it used to be Lechig.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Right? It was very easy to be made fun of for a Lechig love. It was almost like having a Jura love or a Fettercairn love.
Debatable.
I can't believe you're comparing Jura or Fettercairn love to anything. But
back in the days,
joking,
right?
joking.
And now Lechig is so popular among our niche of a niche of a niche, and pickled onions and Funyuns as tasting notes are generally well accepted. It's kind of gone away. It's kind of weird to be in this popular Lechig space.
Okay.
I think what Jason's trying to say here is, I liked it before all of you liked it.
Well, you know, I didn't want to
I
say it
drank
out
it before
loud.
it was cool.
Yeah, for me, there was a part of the question that I really liked where he said that that particular whiskey kind of describes your palate. and the fact of the matter is, I drink based on mood, I drink based on season. So in the wintertime, I really like sherried whiskeys. In the summertime, I really like young Islas or, something with a bright, peaty, citrusy, peaty kind of thing going on. So, but if I were to sort of sum it all up, I'd probably do some sort of an all-rounder, like an Ardnamurchan, or like if I had an older bottling of Highland Park 12 that kind of just ticks all the boxes. I kind of think that's good because I like the idea of an all-rounder. Like if I were to choose a comfort whiskey, it would be something that would have all of these components: a little peat, a little sweet, a little spicy, a little earthy, kind of thing.
Yeah, you've certainly dialed in on an aspect of that question. For me, it was this sense of trust. What would you pour when you felt comfortable exposing yourself
Oh, go easy.
to a fellow whiskey lover?
Do you have to expose yourself before drinking the whiskey?
Whichever works for you and your whiskey friends.
I'm so glad you're sat behind me and I can't see.
I'll send you a picture. Okay, so next question here. This one's from Matthew Welge or Welge. I apologize if neither of those pronunciations are right. And I love the subject to this email. It's just Susanna Skyver Barton.
That's a good subject.
It says, "Cheers, fellas, on another successful year. I thoroughly enjoy your podcast, and I can honestly say your releases are bumped up to the front of my queue as soon as I see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. However, you raised...
Oh, wait, no. That's no place for however.
Just listen. Just keep
You
going.
had my full buy-in, Matthew.
Listen, don't judge a book by its
Okay,
cover.
however, Jason is my favorite.
However, Jason, you've really... No. However, you've raised the bar even higher with your interview/visit with Susanna. Listening to so many whiskey shows and geeking out like I do with so many aspects of the spirits industry, I'm rarely impressed at the level she was able to accomplish with a fun, light, and entertaining attitude. Make her a regular gentleman. Salute, Matthew Welga. I think it's Welga.
Welga, like
Welga.
Helga.
Like Helga. Yeah, or Haida.
Man, the trouble with making Susanna a regular is it really...
He says it in the bottom here. Look at that.
Joshua's skill in reading to the bottom of things.
So pronounce Welgie.
Welgie.
Ghee. It's like ghee, like the clarified butter.
Yep.
Okay, so there you go. So that wasn't a question. That was just to say nice things about Susanna, which I always welcome.
Absolutely. My response is, though, if we bring her on as a regular, she will really highlight our weaknesses, and we will only look worse.
Yeah, this is why we only have Jess on now and again, because...
Because I make you look better. Wow. Could you stop the car? I'm getting out.
No, they make us look bad.
The number of compliments we've had in the last few weeks about the quality of Jesse's interviews.
Surprising. I honestly, I wasn't paying these people off. Thank you very much. Nice people with nice words to say.
So we mentioned his name just a little bit ago, Kevin Dunlop wrote in. And he says, hello.
It was funny when you mentioned his name because he was not the person who wrote in about the Lafroig Select.
Was he not?
No, but I thoroughly enjoyed you using his name.
Why didn't you stop me there? You're like, you keep on digging, and
there are hundreds of things I could correct you on if I start that now.
Kevin, who was it that...
I don't remember the name.
Wow. All right, Kevin, I apologize. I also apologize to the actual person who threw that question in. Anyway, hello, Jason and Joshua.
Oh, let's add Elijah and Jess.
Yeah, let's add Elijah and Jess.
We're on the PS at the bottom.
I hope this new year finds you, all four of you, well. He says both, but here we go. My question this year is a two-parter about nosing whiskey. Firstly, how do you identify other scents when you get fixated on a certain note?
Yep, great question.
Jason, you mentioned this with orange gumdrops in a recent episode.
Mm-hmm.
With Highland scotches, I usually get pear sweeties.
Oh, yeah. Like pear drops, I assume?
Yeah, I think so. And once that's in my brain, I can't get beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, what's the most bizarre note you have identified when nosing a whiskey?
Oh, that's easy.
So let's go Jason, Jess, Elijah, Joshua. Let's do that, seeing as he called you out.
All right. Okay. So how do I get past it when I'm fixating on it?
Yeah, and do you fixate on it?
I do fixate on it. There's no doubt about that. I will then run through, here's second reference in today's episode, I will run through my Rolodex of tasting notes or tasting categories. So if I'm really fixating on one aspect, I will say, okay, is it nutty? Is it fruity? Right? You know, I've had one recently where a number of whiskeys I've been sampling, I've got this kind of perfumey,
yes,
you know, a perfumey note.
We brought that up a few times.
Right?
Yep.
And then I'm thinking, gosh, I'm thinking this all the time, I'm saying this all the time, and then I run through okay, is it nutty? Is it fruity? Is it smoky, earthy? You know, I just start asking myself those other questions and see if I can find it then. And it helps.
And so when you run through that list, do you often find yourself being pulled out of focusing on that, or do you find more often that perhaps that whiskey is maybe only doing one thing really well?
Yeah, no, for the most part, it will put the fixation into the background. Okay. So it's still framing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I'll then, hazelnuts, almonds, cashews, Spanish roasted peanuts, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fun mental exercise.
All right, let's hold off.
Perfect. Yep.
That's perfect.
I
Hold
agree.
off on the second
I
question.
agree.
We'll do that all afterwards. Jess, how do you find yourself fixating on particular notes, and if you do, how do you get out of it?
Yeah, but I think that's quite common. I definitely do as well. And unlike Jason, I put the Rolodex away. I quite often use a flavor wheel.
Yep.
So if I'm judging whiskies, I like to keep to hand the Westland flavor wheel because I think it's got a really nice. You start in the middle and kind of work your way out. And even if I don't necessarily see words or flavors that are matching, because it's obviously a very American-centric, so some of the flavors don't necessarily come quickly to my mind. It can just help redirect you a little bit. And if you have something that's a bit generic, so if you're like thinking, oh, this is smoky, that flavor wheel in particular has a couple of different smoky options. So then you're like, is it a barbecue? Is it a burning wood? Is it, the kind of, it helps you break it down and you can spread out a little bit further and it can help redirect you a little bit. So there are, of course, other flavor wheels available. But I think that's really handy because I sometimes think, and it's something I get asked quite a lot, is how do you taste or smell all these things? And it's just practice. So if you don't really know where to start, having something in front of you, the power of suggestion, I think, can help redirect you a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, if I'm in a tasting and I tell everyone it smells like space hoppers
or foam
something,
bananas.
or foam bananas, like I've set everyone off. Josh is going to have to put a little picture of a foam banana in the show notes. But once you've kind of stuck with that, it can be quite hard. One, if I can't get away from that, but two, if somebody that I'm asking, if we're in a tasting or I'm with somebody when I'm drinking a whiskey, if they're not following what I'm following, that can be a little bit. Then you're basically just causing chaos with your tasting notes, aren't you? So, which I'm a big fan of. You can, but whiskey's so personal. I find it endlessly fascinating that you've got 3 ingredients and the 5 of us in this car all taste different from the same glass, from the same bottle. There is no right and wrong answers. I mean, you don't need to be able to tick the boxes which said, in this dram there was definitely pears, sweet barley, blah blah blah. if I find 5 things in the dram and Jason's only finding 2, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just your palate works differently to mine.
Yep. Yeah, beauty. All right, cheers.
For me, when I get fixated on a tasting note, I usually resort to other people. I watch a lot of YouTube, so I really like whiskey YouTube reviews. I don't know if that's taboo nowadays, but I like.
I hope not. We just joined YouTube, so.
Oh yes,
Please subscribe to Extra. It's all about whiskey.
He set that up deliberately, so you could just put a little plug in there.
Yeah, I'm a big YouTuber, so and people around me. My wife, who has no whiskey experience, I always bring her into my whiskey office. It's called an office, and we'll ask her, and tasting notes. But I'm not. I have to disclose. I'm not as brilliant with tasting notes as the other 4 people in this car. Hearing Jason today talk about our Westland 2-year-old from a few years back and describing it, I was mesmerized.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're like, how much bullshit can come from one person's mouth?
Or one rabbit hole. But.
The answer is, how long is a piece of string? I definitely get fixated on notes. And sometimes, to break myself out of that funk, sometimes I can't break myself out of it.
Yep.
And so I'll just resort to, all right, am I enjoying this whiskey, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, I'll keep drinking it. And if the answer is no, I've been known to just sort of put a little cover on it, revisit it the next day, put it back into the bottle or whatever. Sometimes I have a tough time getting past my own brain.
I have tasted with you on occasions when you've just said, nope, and like you've just simply picked the wrong whiskey for yourself.
Yep.
And you've popped your nose in it and you've said nope, and then you've poured it back in the bottle immediately. It's been in the glass for 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've put it back in the bottle and back on the shelf.
Yep.
Like that's a peace out kind of moment.
Yep. That's kind of what I do.
As a Scotsman, I prefer to sit and suffer. Just to remind myself that I'm alive.
Listen, my people
that
have
mean
suffered
you're,
for millennia. I can't take it anymore.
Yep, 30 seconds. My people don't need to do this any
But,
longer.
yeah, never again. Hashtag never again, Jason. That's what I say.
Does that mean you're double dipping your whiskeys?
Oh,
It means other people have enjoyed my double dipping of whiskeys. Because I'm a sharer, Jess. All right. So the second question is, and this is going to be, this is how I want you three to answer this question. What, and just with one or two words, I don't necessarily even want a description. What is the most bizarre note you've identified when nosing a whiskey? So, what was the whiskey? What was the note? Jason.
take it in the opposite direction this time because I've got a number of answers. And I want to see if somebody replicates.
Elijah. Oh, or do I start with myself?
Yes. You start.
Oh, boy.
He was planning on taking 10 minutes to think about his answer. And now we've forced him into the moment.
There's an odd note that I get in some like really dirty Scotch whiskeys, and it's damp chicory.
I don't know what that
No.
is.
Chicory, it's like a...
Oh, chicory, sorry.
Yeah, chicory, yeah.
I cannot believe you didn't say Mark Bolan's blue velvet suit. Which you put out on your blog for
Mark
the
Bolan's
entire
blue
world to
velvet
read.
suit. Man, because I haven't thought about that whiskey in a long time.
Which whiskey was that?
Oh man, you're gonna make me do. Yeah, I'll tell you
Okay.
what. I'll search the World Net
Okay.
Web while you guys answer the question.
Have a little think while we go back to the round robin here.
All right, Elijah.
This one makes me laugh to myself because I have a terrible sense of humor. But doing a tasting with Amrut one time, and Raj was on the tasting, and we're going through all these great Amruts. One of them was a little sulfury single cask of Amrut. And the tasting note that I wrote down, because we had little tasting mats, was when you eat sour cream or a sour cream dip, and then the gas that you have the next day.
So the taste, the note is your gas.
Yeah, like it's like sour cream farts,
Oh my god.
but specifically sour cream farts because those just are. I'm sure you guys have smelled them before.
And you were attaching somebody's distillery to this?
Well,
Yeah.
you can edit that out if you need to. There was one single cast, sulfury single cast.
Oh,
Come on.
okay. Gotcha,
Who-
gotcha.
Who hasn't?
Oh, okay.
It was with Southern California Whiskey Club, and we picked a fantastic port matured Amrut. So
Gotcha.
Really quickly for the listeners at home,
For the completionists out
for
there.
the completionists out there. So the whiskey that I got, Mark Bolan's powder blue velvet suit, was on Octomore 4.2 Comus.
Oh gosh. We were just talking about that this
Yeah,
weekend.
we were. So let me read the notes really quickly. On the nose. Oh, yeah, here we go. On the nose. The canister and bottle say so. Bruichladdich website and marketing materials echo it. Various web shops concur. The barley here for Octomore was peated to 167 ppm. Blah, 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 blah. Hold on. Here we go. Blah, 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 blah.
This is how I listen to
Blah, blah,
Joshua as
blah.
well, so this is perfect.
Here we go. So I go through the nose and I talk about salted black licorice and cigarette smoke, but on the mouth it said like drinking one of Mark Bolan's powder blue velvet suits.
That's
The
excellent.
mouth is incredibly soft and silky, almost honey-like. So there you go.
You said a moment ago that you haven't thought about that note in a long time, or that whiskey in a long time. I think about that note at least once a week.
Wow.
Yep. It lives with me.
Yeah.
The note, not the suit.
That's awesome. All right, Jess.
I did a whiskey course a long time ago, and we had one of the portions of the course was that you had to taste things blind and write notes and discuss where we thought it was from, and what did you think it was, blah blah. And one of the tasting notes that we came up with was badly run municipal swimming pools,
Oh, I love it.
which I think, like, still I stand by that. Like, it does. You know, like when you go to a swimming pool and it's kind of old and the tiles and the showers are rubbish and there's like chlorine and just
Yeah,
you're not like,
yeah.
wow, this is a fragrant, delicious experience. And then when they revealed the bottle, it was Jura Superstition.
Nice.
There you
So off the top of my head, I think that's probably one of the weirder. And it was just so, like, bitter and chlorine-y. I actually think we were sort of convinced that maybe it was that there was a fault with the bottle because it was just so wrong. Have you ever had that with a whiskey where it,
Oh, yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I've had a couple of, like, Aberlour Bunners. One that was in the pub, and it was so solventy, and it honestly felt like somebody had filled half the bottle with super glue. So we got the barman to pull it and send it back to the distributor. But
Yeah.
the rubbish swimming pools, that kind of sticks with me.
All right, Jason. Now, Jason, so far all of us have broken the rule. I said, "What's the tasting note and what's the whiskey?" And we all went into long descriptors.
Yeah, we did a classic. We wrote a recipe by telling you our life story.
exactly. So, Jason, without building a recipe blog, give it to us.
So if you recall, Good Scotch Drink used to have a section called Say What
Yes.
that was an esoteric tasting note.
That it was.
With a description of said tasting note and a listing of sometimes 1, 2, or 3 whiskeys.
And for the listeners, Good Scotch Drink was Jason's old whiskey blog. It's no longer around, but that was the name of it.
I guess what's coming back, Joshua?
Good Scotch Drink?
Yep.
Oh my God. I got it. I guessed it.
I bought the URL. It came down from $180,000 after I lost it. So the OG in this category, baby vomit,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
And now, again, a bit like the Lechig. Now everybody talks about baby vomit, and kind of understands it's the sweet, kind of cute spit up by a baby, and
Yeah.
not a drunk man's Glasgow gagging in that whiskey alley after running into our own Ms. Lomas.
Wow.
You're welcome. So baby vomit, obviously Bruichladdich and often Port Charlottes.
And just to clarify, like you had said, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
not
part-
even it's
yeah.
not even bile. Some people take it to mean bile.
Yeah, it's
it's
just
not. It's that
sweet
kind
milk.
of exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Are you hearing this, Elijah? These two are defending vomit's not that bad. We're all the way back down the track of fecundity in a good way. For earlier listeners of the podcast, thanks for nodding along. And for the rest of you, I can't remember what episode it was. You're going to have to go all the way back.
A great one that came from Whiskey for Everyone way back in the day was Screeching Tires, and they had that on Octomore.
Ah, yeah. Yep.
We had Church Pews. That was a good one.
All right. I'm going to move on because we have more questions here.
Dusty
we have more
books in the
questions
library.
than we do have time.
That's very true.
Right. So this one is from Dr. Matt Bishop,
Legend.
and he says, "Hi all, please find attached this year's mailbag question. Best wishes and thanks as always for my weekly entertainment, Dr. Matt."
I'm looking at a full PDF here.
Is that a
Yeah, and it's
thesis?
397 pages. Oh my gosh.
This is a
Does he know that I have
manuscript.
old man eyes and I've got a... All right, we're reading this from my phone. And by the way, listeners, in case you couldn't tell, we're doing this episode from inside the car. Elijah's driving. Anyway.
Safely and responsibly.
Very safely.
Yep, you are definitely driving. Dear team, you're driving safely. Dear Team SCN, in my 2022 mailbag episode letter, it was heavy on the literary side with discussion of George Orwell's Animal Farm and the drunk pigs. This year I have softened the tone to allow for the listener's literary capabilities. He fucking puts in parentheses Joshua. All right, let's just be clear here.
But is he wrong?
Jessica.
That
Jessica
was the
Grace.
Oh, what a highlight.
And will look to offer
Not even
my
a Sunday.
thoughts on a more simplistic matter. Jesus, this is getting worse. You are officially on my shit list. Be glad I'm
Joshua,
not Santa Claus.
I hope you
Dr.
feel
Matt.
seen this day because this guy gets it.
So his thoughts are in a more simplistic
the
matter.
wind has really gone out of Joshua's sails here. He is deflated.
He's like, are we nearly home yet? It's the end.
And the simplistic matter that's been occupying my mind since meeting Jess at Glasgow's Whiskey Festival last November.
Do you remember that, Jess?
Yeah, of course I do.
Of course she does.
And there's some quotes along the way. I'm going to I'll read them afterwards. I think. On the table in front of Jess and her festival crew were a range of offerings from Single Cast Nation, looking splendid and carefully arranged together with assorted festival freebies.
Good man, good man.
Due to my need for reading glasses, I couldn't see what they were, so when Jess asked what I would like, Accidental Daluane was my pick. If slightly desperate response. From under the table, the bottle appeared, and I was soon drowning in the glory of its majesty.
Wow.
But wait, says Dr. Matt
I
Bishop.
got a wow from Elijah.
But wait, this whiskey is just 9 years old. And my guess as to what was on the festival table probably included the Clynelish 9, the Glenelgin 10, and listening to other festival goers, all I could hear was, have you tried the new X distillery? Their latest batch Y is still a non-age statement, but isn't it great? Or, quote, Distillery Z has just released a 5-year-old experimental cask, and everyone's drinking it. I feel a change is on the way.
Oh.
I won't say I can feel it in my bones, because all I can feel in my bones is minor arthritic damage and tendonitis. But there is a definite change. It would appear that old age whiskey is no longer respected, and the bright young things are taking control. Oh, this is so good. I have to read this quote. It's from Indiana Jones, and he says, "Don't call me Junior." That's so perfect.
You know Dr. Matt's pandering when there's an Indiana Jones quote.
He is.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to make up for calling me a simpleton. Fucking hell, Dr. Matt Bishop. All right, so to my question. Could Team SCN enlighten me as to whether new has replaced old, as the new and the old is now the new old, or whether this is just the eternal battle with the next generation showing off its fancy new ways to the old whiskey world? I'm looking forward to the new YouTube thing, although I'm having trouble finding the right channel on my television box. May have to ask my son for help, damn. And then just finally, his quotes were just after, what whiskeys to choose on table. The quote was, "Choose wisely, for while the true grail will bring you life, the false grail will take it from you."
Wow.
And that's the Grail Knight from Last Crusade.
Indeed.
And then the other one, talking about the drowning in the glory of the majesty, says it's not the years, honey, it's the mileage. And again, another Indiana Jones quote
Wow.
throughout all. So,
Fantastic.
have new younger whiskeys replaced old as the new, and the old is now the new old? What do you think's going on here, Elijah?
I don't think it's necessarily replaced it. I just think it's there's no longer a stigma with young whiskey. I think it's become accepted. Is older stock more hard to come by? Yes, depending, if you're a distillery
that's got plenty of old stock. I'm sure it's, you can always keep consistent releases, but independent bottling scene, you're seeing less and less of that. But also distilleries that are, producing no age statement. This discussion's been going on for a while, but now I really think especially like in the last 3-4 years, fairly priced no age statement or low age statement bottlings are acceptable. So
Yeah. Yep.
Do you think that's out of choice? Like, the older age statements are getting progressively much more expensive at an exponential rate, I'd say. So people are seeking out other whiskies. I think people's price ranges don't change too much. So if you're treating yourself and your budget is £100, maybe £100 5 years ago was getting you whiskey in its 20s, but now you're still spending £100. That doesn't go half as far.
Yep.
So now your £100 is buying you, I don't know, 18-year-olds of that distillery, or some non-age statement, or like a more experimental bottling. I don't know. I'm a real cynic because I'm an old bitter person, which you're not going to turn into. But I'm not convinced that people are opting to drink, or certainly within the UK, I don't think people are necessarily opting to drink younger and even single-digit aged whiskey because they've had an epiphany, which is that young whiskey can be really tasty and really good. Because people are so ingrained in this idea of older equals betterer.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody woke up in the last 5 years and was like, oh, do you know what? 9-year-old Dalyuan is the thing I'm going to go to the store today and pick up. I think if it is, it's because they have been exposed to that whiskey. I still think most people, if you put in front of them a 9-year-old Dalyuan and a 35-year-old Dalyuan, I think a lot of people would reach for the older one first.
I think you're right. However, without a doubt, I think you're right.
There's a lot of asterisks there and a lot of if, buts, and qualifications to be made.
But
if we're talking about the average person who walks into a shop who's not a whiskey nerd, who's not, like Dr. Matt, interested in trying a secret Dalyuan I was hiding under the table away from the prying public of Glasgow Whisky Festival, I think you're still going to be looking for the oldest, the darkest, or whatever fits your price range, rather than being like, oh, this 5-year-old Adam Merkin sounds like a great deal.
But I think there's a logistical component to this that almost forces brands, distilleries, whatever, to create non-age statement whiskeys, in a smart way, in a delicious way, and also have them starting to embrace the mention of a younger age statement. And those logistical reasons are, the past 10 to 15 years, whiskey has grown in popularity to levels that we've simply have never seen. And new markets have opened that hadn't been opened previously. And whiskey is a finite product. There's only so much of it. And so, of course, older whiskey is going to get more expensive. And so if you have that £100 or $125 cap, what you're able to purchase is going to be limited based on your budget. And because so much whiskey is being spread out, and distilleries, brands, etc., have to release younger whiskeys, if you're interested in trying whiskeys, that's what your budget calls for, and that's your own rabbit hole that you start going down, and you'll start finding that you like these younger whiskeys.
Rabbit hole really has been the word of today's podcast. Have we used the word rabbit hole in any of our seasons? I feel like today it's
all of your life.
I like what Dr. Matt Bishop is suggesting here.
That I'm a simpleton?
Well, let's be honest.
Yeah, we'll go easy.
That was amazing. No, this idea that the new generation, the young kids on the scene, are saying, hey, our parents, our aunts and uncles were the ones hoarding the old whiskies. Well, I tell you what, we like the young ones, right? We like the 5-year-old Ardbegs. We like the 8-year-old Lagavulins. I like the idea of it being kind of a rebellious move here. That is That's real nice. And I hope that is the truth of the matter.
Hold on one second. I think Chris has something he wants to say here.
Yeah, I think you missed one thing, is that the cask management programs of all the distilleries are much better than it probably used to be. So you can release a younger whiskey as well, if you take it from that perspective. So that becomes your Americans, your Kilhoemans, that we're all very excited of, and it's because the liquid is ready at that time. And as we have speaking about this whole weekend over Lagavulin, which you guys have been wrong and I've been right.
How dare you?
That is why it was 16 that you used to release rather than 8.
Yeah, so I like that point, because and I think it goes beyond cask management. You know, if we take 2 examples, we'll go to Jess's example of Mortlach, where they create a spirit that makes that whiskey better as it gets older, right? And you compare that to the spirit of Kilhoeman or Ardnamurchan or Nicnean or M&H, or, you know, the list, we could just keep on rattling an incomplete Joshua list here. But they're focusing on a spirit that can be matured They're releasing a spirit that doesn't need that extra maturation, that's meant to get to 4, 5, 6 years old and be delicious
Very much so.
at that age. So, like, yes, cask management is super important, and that has changed the industry writ large. But I think it goes back to the producer's choice, all the way back to the mashing on the type of spirit that they want to release.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so thank you.
I'm still reeling from that assault on Lagavulin 8 from Sweet
I
Scott
thought
there.
you were talking
He's
about the
not wrong,
assault
though.
on me.
Oh, that one was accurate.
All right, so this next one is from Tom Jodelka. And he says, "Dear J, J, and J, I'll leave you all up to sort out the order, and E. I hope this message finds you all doing well. Congratulations on completing Season 6 of One Nation Under Whiskey."
Thank you.
Him.
Yes.
Yeah, him. Yeah, thank you, Tom. I was hoping you could answer some of the follow-up questions for me that stem from your on-air responses.
Oh, boy.
As my questions regarding the 9-year-old Daluane,
Hey!
recurring theme, aged in both first fill bourbon and first fill sherry a few months ago. In his response to my questions regarding how you monitor casks, Jason mentioned that purchasing casks sight unseen has become a larger part of your business due to necessity, and this left me wondering 2 things. 1, what aspects of your business necessitate purchasing more casks sight unseen? What has changed in recent history that requires you to do this more often nowadays?
Yep.
And 2, what criteria must a cask meet before you would consider purchasing it sight unseen? And then he closes it out. It says, "Thank you for graciously answering my cacophony of previous questions, and thank you in advance for considering this last round. All the best to you in Season 7. Cheers, Tom Jodelka. And P.S. I enjoyed Elijah leading you all through a mezcal tasting many episodes ago. Any chance of releasing an SCN mezcal anytime soon?" So, Jason, I'm going to let you answer this question, or you can hand it off to Jess if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it, Jess. I always like hearing your perspective.
Oh, no. So the murky world of cask buying.
This is starting well. Buckle up, listeners.
It's very much like going on an epic, you know, those reader chooses adventures, where, you know, like if
Choose
you
your own
think this-
adventure.
Choose your own adventure,
That's the
yeah.
one. Turn to page 9. So the reason that we are increasingly, and not just us, the necessity of purchasing casks sight unseen is that the speed at which casks are being bought and sold, I think, is much faster than it was in the olden days. So the idea of requesting a sample, somebody going to a warehouse, finding the cask, taking the labels, putting it on the bottle, going back to the office, posting it, waiting for Royal Mail to not be on strike, posting it to me, and then we make ourselves even more complicated by then dividing samples and sending them to America.
Yep.
That takes time. Whereas, there's a greater demand of people for a whole host of reasons who are looking to purchase casks. So, you can put it out and 5 people can be like, yeah, we'd like samples. Or there'll be one guy who'll be like, I'll just take it.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
think there's a growing trend more towards that. So this is something I've been talking about recently with other people about working with trusted partners.
Yeah.
Which definitely sounds like that should have a trademark after it. Trusted partners. It means that if you're working with somebody who you've perhaps purchased from in the previous, times, and you trust that they're not selling you casks of moldy water or empty casks, you may feel more inclined to go with this sight unseen. I would like to probably put a little kind of caveat in here that we're not bottling anything.
No,
unseen.
well said.
Yeah, thank you.
Everything is
Yeah.
tasted, and for as long as we are able to hang on to this, like with our clause to not purchasing before we've sampled. I've been saying it for a while. So far, we've done a pretty good job. The very vast majority of the casks we're trying before we even purchase. That practice is getting harder, but certainly that's not going to mean that if you're buying a single cask nation, it's something that we bought, put out into a bottle the next day, and
Yeah.
released it to the world at large. It's not just affecting us. It's also because, people are buying in different volumes. It's very difficult. If you wanted to purchase a large parcel of casks, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to get a sample of every cask. You're going to end up with
Yeah.
a representative sample of those 10 casks or 50 or whatever the number is casks you've purchased.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. It's just the change in the industry. I think it's not we met somebody and they bring a load of clanking little jars along with them and we swap them in a car park and go our separate ways.
You're back to Whiskey Alley again.
Well, there's the other aspect of it too. As a young business, we did have those trusted partners, TM,
Spirit of collaboration.
Spirit of Collaboration, and we also had a smaller number of casks that we were bottling. But as a company looking to grow and continue to grow, we knew that we'd have to get into the situation where we would be buying sight unseen, getting new relationships for casks, and that it would necessitate a finishing program. That
Yeah.
there's a good chance we're going to buy a bunch of casks, not having tasted them, and realizing that either A, they need a bit more time in cask, or B, they're going to need a little bit of work to to get them to something that we're proud of.
Yep.
So
That's a good point I hadn't thought about.
yeah.
When we're purchasing casks, we're not necessarily purchasing casks that are ready to go. And increasingly, now that we have got the ability to do so, we can purchase casks that are definitely not ready to go. We can buy casks of new make, put them away, or decide to put them into something that they didn't arrive in. And so therefore, if you're buying new make, well, you don't really, if you know the distillery mark, you don't necessarily really need a sample of that. So if you're buying new make casks, I'd say buying them sight unseen is lower risk, because we're going to put it away for ages.
Yeah.
If we buy it and it tastes fresh and like it came off the stills yesterday, well, that doesn't matter, because in our heads, we're not planning on bottling it for a good stretch. So that's not so important. I think, if you're planning on bottling and putting it out immediately, you probably want to have a pretty up-to-date picture of what that cask is doing and what the liquid is tasting like. Whereas if it's going to sit in a warehouse for a few years, or we're going to re-rack it, that's not so urgent.
I think we've cracked the code on finishing, though. The response on the accidental
Yeah.
diluting has, I think, proven conclusively that we should buy first fill bourbon casks and finish them in first fill sherry. I think that's a home run every time.
But we could call that the double firsting line.
The double first.
Yeah, you heard me. Whatever you made that into is your dirty conscience. The double first range.
I certainly didn't get a double first at Aberdeen University, so it might be the first double first in my life.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Or my second.
You and me both.
Diluting.
So I kind of feel as if our answers made it so we didn't need to answer that second question, like, what's the criteria of buying cast sight unseen?
I was thinking about that as we were talking, though. I would add to it when we are looking over a spreadsheet, we are looking for interesting distillery, maybe an interesting cask, maybe something that's already been moved into a finishing cask by a broker somewhere. And then, of course, we're looking at price, and we're crunching, which market is this going into? Is this going to come over to the US? Is that, where's this going to live, and how do we price it? So there are definitely criteria that we're running through even as we're going over a list. I did like what you added on, Jess, to Joshua's comment about when it comes to new make, you pretty much know what the new make is like coming out from a distillery, and then it's just processing an order and deciding what cask we think that spirit might do well in.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end here. There's actually more questions that came in than we actually have time for on this episode, because we're getting close to Elijah's.
Amazing questions, though.
Yeah, really great.
Absolutely fantastic.
I wanted to close out
almost
this...
as good as the answers.
Some of them.
Almost. There was a close run thing in some cases.
I wanted to close out this series of questions with one from Michael Nolan.
I've heard of him.
And he says, SCN team.
He gets us.
That's
He
very
does.
diplomatic.
Yeah, he even says, this eliminates the worry of whose name is first, middle, and last.
Smart.
Too diplomatic.
Hope this email finds you well in the wilds of Seattle. As we speak, we are sending greetings from sunny, warm Florida. It's been freezing and raining here in Seattle. Quite a different thing.
I think the weather's beautiful.
Yeah, it hasn't been freezing.
Calm down.
Very Scottish.
I feel very home.
Our question is, now, and by our, this is of course Michael and Bonnie, now that there is a team of 4, how does the cask selection work? Does J&J pick the cask for North America retail and online? And Jess pick
I know where
the
he's
cask
taking this.
for
I even know
ROW.
I know what question 2
exactly
is.
what he's asking.
And Elijah for cask pick programs. Or is this a team effort with cask samples going all over the world for final picks? How does staff meetings happen for SCN typically? Like, is it UK 4 p.m., 4 p.m. EST, 11 p.m. PST, et cetera, et cetera?
I think the answer to all of this is yes. Next question.
What is he? I feel like this is a little probing. Like, there's a little too much insight into how we do our mysterious business.
I think he wants to catch us at our next coffee break.
I very much enjoy that he thinks I start meetings at 4 p.m. my time.
And it continues. He says, of course, we're all eager to know when the next Glenbergie is going to be selected.
That's not what I thought.
Is that where
was
you thought he
coming.
was going to go?
He has Glenbergie Tourette's.
Also, please have Jess tell us more about the Lechig.
There's where he was going.
That's where I knew
That's
we were going.
exactly where this has been going from the first word.
That she's been telling us was her whiskey of 2022.
I think you'll find that's not quite true.
How many people have had follow-ups to you naming that your SCN of 2022?
Remind her to give us an early heads up so that we can secure a couple of bottles for ourselves here in the U.S. And finally, happy birthday, happy 30th birthday to Elijah. Thank you all for all you do. Your friends, Michael and Bonnie.
Beautiful.
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 They're like menches.
They're lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely.
Menchim. So, yeah, that's...
I think we should start off by saying he's asked for a date for the diary because I flippantly in one podcast made a joke about a made-up date when I said the next ROW release would drop. And on that very day that I had made up, I got a text message from the good Mr. Nolan saying, so remind me which shops I should go and buy the release in? And I had made the
He
whole
listens
thing up.
carefully.
So I will not be tied to dates. You can't fool me twice.
So let me jump in here with the idea of selecting casks. I mean, traditionally it was just me and Jason, and until we brought you both on, Jess and Elijah, and you both have contributed in a really great way to the casks that are being bottled.
Absolutely.
One of the things, and so I would say, it's not as simple as it is a group effort, but there are many elements to it being a group effort. But one of the things that I found interesting in the process of bringing you in, Jess, as someone to look after the UK and European markets, was that when we are selecting casks for those markets, ABV really comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like here in the US, geez, if we bottled something at 70% alcohol, people would go nuts for it. But in the UK, that's some absolute scary stuff. And so I guess I'm going to take Nolan's question a little bit and twist it. Do you think that the US and UK European markets, from just simply from a palate standpoint, are quite different?
Yeah, definitely. I think what the markets are looking for are, high quality, and they're coming to single cask nations, so they're looking for single casks. But I think within those parameters, there's a whole world of different whiskies you can put in that. And I definitely think what's released for the ROW, for my rest of the world markets, is we're looking certainly at different palates. I think, there's a number of things that are sought after by whiskey drinkers that don't necessarily come top of the list in the US. I'm very disappointed in you that you are actually giving this as a straight answer and not saying it's a 4-way arm wrestle across the Zoom.
It's just a big game of Twister.
Yeah,
is what it is.
But being serious though, I think when we're looking at it, yeah, you obviously need to consider the market. There's no point putting a product out to a market that is doing us a disservice if it's something that will do better in the US than it will do in somewhere else, Sweden or Germany or Japan. There's no point sending that product away to America if we think it can be better serviced for nation drinkers somewhere else.
Yeah. I think that is likely a bigger demarcation as far as where casks go, is that the UK EU palate versus the US palate. So that's one set of potential places where whiskey go. The other set of potential places is U.S. retail versus U.S. online. Mm-hmm. And that's a question that we get asked all the time. Like, why do you select this for retail and that for online? And I mean, typically speaking, our online tends to be where our distillery direct partnerships go, or sort of spirit of collaboration, or where there's just a big confusing story that can't be told on a retail shelf,
or an accidental finishing,
right?
Delicious,
like the Catoctin Creek in the Kilhoman,
which was
PX
purposeful,
cast, right?
Yeah, that wasn't the accident.
Which was purposeful.
But that's my point, right? And that is just simply just a bigger story to tell, and putting that on retail shelves, I just feel, we feel that it may be easier for us to control that narrative and bring people along on that journey, because it really was a journey that we took people down, keeping them updated on where that whiskey was and so on.
Yeah, since we're really only in the business of teasing Michael Nolan, I will say that Elijah has recently made his first solo pick that has been brought to us for approval, and that's all I'm going to say about that right now.
No dates when it's going to be released?
No.
Or what it is?
No.
You guys are so mean.
No.
But you're as bad as I am.
Yes.
Okay, that's reassuring.
So
that's why the team works.
So listen, it has been 12 years of this company, 6 years of this podcast, a handful of years having both you, Elijah, and Jess in the company. And each year, I just think has been incredible. Jason, thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the beginning of all this. To you, Elijah and Jess, thank you both. Like, you really are helping us to grow in ways that that really could not be possible without you two. And to the listener, like, I say this all the time in tastings, because people say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so used to just hearing your voice on my radio," and and so on. Like
That's how I felt this whole car ride. Like,
Yeah.
radio on?
right, this really is for me the most enjoyable part of what we do, and it's just sitting and having these conversations and being grateful to the people who actually listen.
Yeah. It's extending that whiskey community.
How can I help?
Oh,
All right.
the car is offering to get us out of here.
So-
Seems ideal.
So I say thanks to you all, thanks to the listeners,
Thanks to you, Joshy.
and I'd like to say this to Elijah.
Oh.
I'd actually like us all to say this to Elijah. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Elijah. Happy birthday to you. And many more.